some leather.
Right.
So we got in a little Knipex deal.
Yeah.
I guess I say it's little. I described it as little, but we got like 300 or 400.
No, there's over 600.
Over 600?
Yeah,
Really?
there's over 600.
Anyway, it was a little.
Right
pallet.
at 600. Yeah.
It came on a little pallet.
But it was Knipex. So
Yeah.
and the interesting thing about that deal, every deal is different. And Jory made an offer on this deal, I think it was in April of last year. And the company that had it responded not at all. They didn't say it's too low. They didn't say no. They didn't say they'd make a counteroffer. They said nothing. And then about 10 months later, they said, okay, we'll take it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think part of that is just being very busy.
Yeah.
Like I actually forgot about it, but you know, with supply crunch and all that, people are busy still. But that got us talking. I guess before we get into that, we do have 5 Knipex suppliers. One of them we don't have very many of. We'll probably sell that in the next couple of days on that little smooth jaw one, the wrench plier.
8603-180.
But we got a decent. But if you like Knipex and you like those, they'll be the cheapest on the internet for a while.
Yeah.
Until we burn through them, and they've been selling at a good clip.
Yeah, because they're comparatively very cheap.
Yeah. So if you're here just for the deals, that's the deal. Before my dad regales you with the history of all the closeout deals he's ever bought.
No, it got us thinking about every single deal is unique and different, has its own story. And so we started thinking, and there's been a lot of interesting ones. First,
you have an example?
Yeah, this is what's called a bomb tether. They made these in the Second World War to hook 5 bombs together, and and then and there was millions of them, and the war ended with, there were still millions, and a surplus guy bought all million of them. Probably paid like a half cent a piece or a penny a piece.
Are you just saying a million, or were there really a million?
Yeah, there was really a lot of them.
Okay.
And then the question is, you've got this thing. Show them again. And what is its utility? What can you do with it? And so this guy had them, and he happened to live in California. And I don't know how long this went on before he could figure out what to do with them, but he was driving down, I think, on Highway 1, and he happened to pass a vineyard. And then he kind of slammed on his brakes and turned around and went into the vineyard and held up one of these things, because he always carried them around, and he said, these are for holding up grapevines. And that's where most of the million went. Then we came along and we got them, and we got 40 or 50,000 of them. And we have, I think, the only ones left in the world now.
They come in really cool old wood boxes that are marked 1944, 1945.
Yeah.
They've got a little exploding bomb with a fuse that's lit on them.
Right. And we sold an awful lot of them to this guy in Brooklyn who used them to hang Christmas lights. And that's kind of a beating swords into plowshares kind of thing. But anyway, not uncommonly when you get a surplus deal, you get something like that, and you have to figure out a new utility for it to sell. And there's a lot of good stories like that.
So another problem with surplus deals is you never know how they're packed. Right. And so there have been all sorts of deals that we've got, that other people have got, where you think you're getting a little of something, but then it turns out that's not true. So you got one of those, right?
Oh,
there's so many of these.
Yeah, there's so many of them. And it's a common problem. One time the rep from at the time Cooper Group, that one of the companies they had was Crescent. He came rushing into the store and he says, Crescent has 20,000 of these extension screwdrivers with a magnet on them and bits. And
did the magnet come out of the...
Yeah, and extend it out.
Gavin found one of those the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They were pretty dumb.
They were.
Which is why they ended up on the closeout market.
Yeah, but he came rushing and he says, listen, Crescent wants to get rid of them today. if you offer anything, you can get them. And there's just 20,000 of them. And so, we offered just a little bit. And not too long later, we get a phone call, you've got them. And what Mark didn't know, the rep from Cooper Group, and we didn't know, was these were something that was probably made for Home Depot or Lowe's. And they were made as an end cap display. And so there was a quarter pallet, and each one of them had, and they were about 3 or 4 feet tall, and each one of them had 72 screwdrivers. And so you divide 72 into 20,000 or 24, whatever it was, but we got 2 truckloads of these things and just filled up the store, all the aisles and everything. And so we had to work feverishly to take them all apart and throw them in big Gaylords. So anyway, that was...
Yeah, the Tereshinskis, they were a military surplus company in New York. They had a similar deal.
Right.
Do you remember how many truckloads theirs were?
Oh, yeah.
They filled up their entire warehouse.
Yeah, he bought these rubber gaskets from the government for next to nothing. But what he didn't know was each one was packed in an envelope, and then in a larger envelope, and then in a box. And so he might have bought 1 million or maybe 2 million of these gaskets, thinking that they wouldn't take much space, but it was at least, it might have even been 10 truckloads or something. And he was young at the time, and he was doing it to impress his dad that he knew how to buy things. So he had all these rubber gaskets that were like 3 or 4 inches. And it was the same problem with the bomb tethers. What do you do with them? And he was in Brooklyn, and it was a problem because their warehouse was filled. And he would carry them around. Every time he'd see somebody, he'd give them one. He says, if you can think of something to do with this, I'll buy you a ticket to any show in town and buy you dinner at any restaurant you want to go to. And and this went on for a while, and finally he was in a movie one night, and there was a friend of his a couple of rows up, and he said, hey Ed, use them as tourniquets. And Ed says, you've got the dinner. And so the next day he called up first aid companies and said, I've got some tourniquets. And anyway, that's where they all went.
Yeah.
And
that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good story.
I remember Marspec. I don't know if Marspec's still around.
I don't think so.
But they were a great military surplus company in
they were the
Provincetown.
Yeah, Provincetown.
Mostly naval related, but they would get lots of strange European stuff that nobody else had. It was like the real deal.
Yeah.
And they imported a bunch of those medic kits from the Second World War.
Oh.
And it was like, it was like a whole container full of them. And they had all of they actually had all the stuff still left in them. And he got the shipment and he was unpacking them, and he realized that every single medic kit had a glass bottle of morphine still in it.
Oh.
And that he had...
I don't know this story.
Oh yeah, he had imported just like an insane amount of morphine into the country accidentally.
Uh-huh.
He said he poured it all down the drain, but
right.
There's things like that happen too.
Right.
So a lot of times you don't know what, you're on the phone, you're not like looking at this stuff, you're just negotiating with these people, and you don't know what you're getting sometimes.
Yeah. Or my grandfather, Harry Epstein, was at a military surplus sale in Topeka years and years ago, and it was an auction, and they had all these bins full of tools and stuff, and he saw this one bin. It had soldering irons in it, and they were really, it was just the rod and then the real heavy end that you would heat up to melt the solder, and they were dirty, and they probably had cosmoline all over them. And at the lunch break, he got permission. He took one, and so he had an hour, and he went straight to a jeweler, and sure enough, these things were pure sterling silver. And so, whereas normally he might have bid a nickel or 50 cents for them, he bid $1, which he knew that, everyone would have thought he was crazy to, But anyway, he got them all, and they were all sterling silver, and so that was, and there's almost every surplus guy has a story like that.
Right.
And they're all good.
Right. Yeah.
And
What else you got?
what else I got?
Now we can talk about new stuff.
Well, the hand grenade boxes is a good story.
Okay, I don't know this one.
Oh, a government made a contract with a company to produce, I think it was like 32,000 boxes to hold hand grenades. And they, the contract was agreed upon, and they gave them the specs, and the company made all 32,000 of these ammo boxes. And when they delivered them to the government, to the military depot, the way it worked was hand grenades came in trays. I think there was 6 hand grenades in a tray, and they were to go in there was going to be 2 trays in each wooden box. And when the government had sent the specs for the box, they were like an 1/8 inch off, or 1/16 of an inch. But anyway, just very slightly, but the trays wouldn't fit in the wooden boxes. So the government had 32,000 of these wooden boxes that they couldn't use. And a friend of ours in St. Joseph bought them all and put them in his barn. And then we sold them.
Is that Mike?
That was, no, not Mike.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But anyway, he would bring 400 at a time to us, and most of that 30,000 or 32,000 we sold here. We still got a few of them laying around, but
I feel like there was just a news story. I'm going to get all the details of this wrong, but there was a news story about a guy in France that was running, maybe it was France, that was running their train system, and they built these brand new trains, and the trains didn't fit through the tunnels.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that, but
yeah, I think it just happened like a week or two ago.
Right.
But man, I mean, what else you got? You got anything else?
Just in terms of variation, there was a company, it was called Goodell, not in business anymore. They were kind of the main manufacturer of putty knives.
And we still have some of the flex tape knives.
But and they did a lot of private contracting where, they'd make them for all the big tool companies, Stanley and everybody, and so like when Stanley would order putty knives, they would order 10,000 of each size or something, and so when they'd get the order, they'd start printing Stanley's name on them or whatever company was, and invariably there would be misprints, and so they'd just throw them aside, and we had the deal where we got all the misprints, and it'd still say Stanley, but maybe the N was smudged or something, and it was a great deal, and this went on for years. And I can remember when I got here, we would have in stock usually 10,000 of each size, from 1.25" all the way up to 6 inch, and it was just a steady supply of them, and it went on for years. It was a great deal. And then after 15, 20 years of this, Goodell got the idea that they would stamp the labels on the handles before they put the handles on the putty knives. And so that way, when they didn't work out, they would just throw the handles away. And so anyway, that was the end of that deal.
Right. There's also deals where it's caused by, like I'm thinking of Husky and Craftsman, how they required Western Forge to stock a certain amount of product in case that they would need it. So it's like you get one of these big products of these companies, and they're like, you've got to have 5,000 of these on hand just in case we need them, and that's just part of the deal.
Yeah.
And then one day, they call up and they're like, oh hey, we're changing the part number from a 91735 to a 91736.
Right.
And we're not accepting anymore that have the 5 on them.
Right.
And that kind of stuff happens.
Right.
And then you end up having to, all that stuff goes on liquidation.
Or like when we got all the last of the Crescent, American-made adjustable wrenches. Crescent, at some point decided they weren't going to make them in America anymore. But they had over 27,000 American-made wrenches left in stock, and they didn't want to mix them
with their Chinese
with the
wrenches.
Chinese stuff, so they just closed them out to.
Right.
Yeah. So.
It's just cleaner on their that way for whatever reason.
Right.
All right. Well, that's pretty good. That's 16 minutes of old liquidation stories.
Yeah, and there's a lot more stories, but they're just all different. They're all interesting.
Yeah, and there'll be more to come.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all the merger stories, when SK and Facom broke up.
Or the bankruptcy stories, all the times SK's gone bankrupt. It's always paid off for us really well.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of SK, someone on Garage Journal posted a picture of an SK wrench, a new SK wrench with a Made in China sticker on it. Mm-hmm. We were kind of on the fence about what to do with them. The SK reps actually came in today. Yesterday, that's
mm-hmm.
right. But no real, still we have absolutely no idea of what's going on there. I just, nothing looks good. I'm thinking, we're not going to carry their open stock stuff anymore. We're not going to carry, who knows where it's going to be made. If they can still make a U.S. made ratcheting wrench and a U.S. made ratchet, maybe we'll carry it, but I don't think that they have any manufacturing ability. I think they're just kind of looking for other people that are making stuff to make stuff for them, almost like a craftsman.
That was the sense I had. It's been 2 years since they've been bought out, and I asked them what production is, and I thought they had moved everything to Pittsburgh, but
I think they liquidated it.
Yeah, so I think they're still looking for a production facility,
which explains why they haven't been able to make anything, because everyone else is too busy making their own stuff.
Yeah.
To stop what they're doing and be like, oh, well, we'll make this for SK.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Boy, yeah. So anyway, not looking good. Channellock, I posted earlier. Channellock is coming out with a screwdriver line, American-made screwdriver line, which I think is made by Mayhew. They're coming out with a pry bar line, which I'm not sure whether that's a Mayhew or Wildy.
Right.
They look a little different though, honestly. I'm not. I'd be interested to see what the handles. Matt's going to order some just so we can check them out. Mm-hmm. And then, and they're also coming out with a locking plier line, and the locking plier line is made in Spain by Grip-On, and they are painted. Looks like they're painted black and blue for the Channellock. I've not really looked into the Grip-On line. I've heard various things about it. It's inevitably going to be better than the Irwin stuff. So I think it's worth a shot.
So can we get Grip-On locking pliers now, made in Spain?
Well, that say Channellock on them.
Oh, but you can't get them to say Grip-On.
We're not set up with Grip-On.
Oh, but we could be.
Yeah, but I think it would be better. I don't know. I guess we could see whether the Channellocks are. Right. If Channellock makes them twice as expensive, which I don't think they'll do.
No, they won't.
And I'm sure Grip-On has some kind of reseller program where Channellock could sell them competitively with Grip-On. If they don't, then this is all very silly.
Right.
So you'd hope that they would have figured this out. Right. I'm sure they have.
One would assume.
Yeah. We've had good luck with Spanish manufacturing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We sell a lot of Spanish knives, these Kudman knives.
Yeah.
Tons of them through the store. Really don't sell very many online. And then there's a Rega adjustable wrenches, and Wright has some of those, and that's really
No, Wright. They went to Taiwan. Channellock's got a Rega. That's what we've stocked the 4-inch and the 12-inch.
Really, I thought Wright was doing.
No, they were, and then they switched to Taiwan.
Did they really?
Yeah, they're all Taiwan.
Well, yeah, Channellock has the Rega, and they. After these American-made Crescents, that's going to be where the next best adjustable wrench. So yeah, I don't know. We'll give them a shot. I had talked to Martin because I had heard a rumor that they were thinking about making an adjustable wrench, and that turned out to be true. They were thinking about it, and they decided not to do it.
Right.
And basically, there's a certain amount of investment that they would have to make. Right. Which mainly was about that little knurled piece. and they looked at the numbers, and for whatever reason they didn't think they could do it and be price competitive. Or I don't know the actual reason, but that was it was the knurling part was going to be too expensive to manufacture. And then if you get it manufactured overseas, then suddenly it's global components, and then it, you know. But that was pretty disappointing. I mean, someone asked me today about why the supply chain problem is still happening, and like inflation is still, it's not going up as much, but it's still going up. And I think a lot of that has to do with the lack of investment in manufacturing, such as decisions like that. And again, I'm not faulting Martin. I mean, that's a huge decision for a company that size, and you know, it's a very difficult thing. And for a lot of these companies, you know, like Wright or, you have this footprint, you know, which is this building that you might have been in for, you know, 70, 80, 100 years. And it's not, you can't just, sometimes they're just, they've maximized their amount of space. So even if you want to up manufacturing, it's like, you've got to
build a new building.
You got to build a new building, or I mean, it gets really expensive really quickly, and so that's a hard thing for these companies to invest in. And the companies that do have that capital, like Apex, have, you know, don't care at all about American manufacturing, right? And so like all of that capital is not going into right. And so I think the demand has been steady, but these companies just still cannot keep up with it. Midwest SNP, you know, we ordered Midwest SNPs, basic offset SNPs, and we were told
about a year.
Which is crazy because every sheet metal guy in the country uses an offset pair of Midwest. So yeah, I think, anyway, I don't know what to do about it, but that's just my sense of why inflation is continuing to go up, at least for, you know, the small part of the world that we exist in. And it's probably not going to happen unless there's some big investment in our ability to produce more stuff.
Yeah, and there's, you know, there's been, you know, American tool manufacturing is basically atrophied since the 1970s, and it seemed like it seems like it's sort of stabilized, and for a period it looked like it might be increasing, and then Western Forge closed, and Malco has stopped making their Eagle grips, and
it's still, we haven't heard anything, but I mean, that was the other thing. People were looking at what to do with that Malco plant. And haven't heard anything about that, but that's still up in the air. It could still happen. It could still, you know, someone could figure it out.
And Wiley was thinking about it, and they opted not to.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. But yeah, so people, you know, we've given up making adjustable wrenches in this country. You know, at this point, there's, you know, we're not making locking pliers, and it seems like there's, you know, a market opportunity, but like Joy says, the expense must be just overwhelming, or the companies just don't want to make that expense.
Well, can we end on some good news?
Yeah.
What do you got?
Well, we just got this Knipex deal.
That's from a German company. Yeah. So that deal was kind of the result of their, I want to say this was maybe, I mean, this was before my time, but maybe in the 80s and 90s, there was this mentality of manufacturers in which you could buy everything from them, right? And so they didn't just want to sell you the 5 or dozen things that they made. They wanted to sell you every single thing, and so they wanted to have a complete catalog. And what that caused was either you're going to slap your name on a bunch of stuff that you don't make, or you're just going to buy that stuff from other companies and just put it in their catalog. And
they all the big guys did it.
Everyone did it, and everyone has now ceased to do that. I mean, it seems like that was a strategy that's been abandoned. and people have now started to just focus in on the things that they actually make and hone in on that, which I think is probably a better way to do it.
Yeah.
So anyway, this was just surplus from companies making that decision.
Right.
Yeah.
We good?
Yeah, great.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right.